house where the Axe Massacre took place, an estate in Iowa, a favorite haunted place for ghost hunters and horror fans. In 1912, a mass murder took place here. 6 children and 2 adults were axed to death by unknown assailants. It is still unknown what exactly happened that night. In 1994, the house was purchased by new owners, and as a result of the restoration, the estate took on the appearance of the very site of the tragedy in 1912. So the house was turned into a tourist attraction, and now you can stay here for $428 a night. Visitors to the hotel often remark that the house is haunted by all sorts of things, such as a ghost walking around with an axe and children screaming. But November 2014 was particularly dark for the owners of the house. A young man and his friends stayed here, who was later found by his friends with a stab wound to the chest, presumably inflicted by himself. The friends called the emergency services, and the young man was flown by helicopter to hospital. As police later stated, the boy self-inflicted the wound at around 1 a.m. It was around this time in 1912 that the massacre began on the estate. The lad recovered from his wounds, but never told what really happened that night. The incident upset the mistress of the estate, who said, "Of course, the house has gotten publicity, but not in the way I had envisioned. I wouldn't want visitors to come here fearing that something like this might happen to them. The house is still open to tourists today, day and night." The first thing that comes to mind when you think of bloody dolls are vintage Victorian porcelain figurines that immediately send shivers running down your body when you look at them. They're hardly that easy to find nowadays, and yet they're not the only toys that inspire fear. For example, Elsa from Disney's Cold Heart, a Christmas present in 2013, made all the headlines in local newspapers in Houston. When you press a button on Elsa's necklace, the doll starts saying phrases from the cartoon and singing the song "Let It Go." "For 2 years she did it in English," said the mother of Emily, the lucky girl who was given the cherished doll. But in 2015, she started doing it in Spanish and English alternately. That said, there are no buttons for her to switch. The family bought the doll more than 6 years ago and has never changed the batteries. The woman said the doll continued to talk and sing even when it was turned off. Eventually, in December 2019, the family decided to throw the strange toy away. But a few weeks later, it was found again in the nightstand in the living room. The children said they didn't put it there. I believe them, because they certainly wouldn't have gone through street trash cans, the girl's mother said in an interview. By that point, Elsa had stopped singing the English version of "Let It Go" altogether, and only sang it in Spanish when pressed. The family repeatedly discarded the doll, placing it at the very bottom of the container. Then, after returning from a short family trip, they once again found Elsa in the front yard of the house. This time, they sent the doll to a family friend by mail in Minnesota, and he attached it to the front door of his van. The doll has not yet returned to its previous owners. In 2015, a family from Auburn, Pennsylvania decided to go about insulating their home. In the process, they discovered that the walls were already insulated with dozens of animal carcasses. According to the press, the family retrieved the carcasses of dead animals wrapped in old 1930s newspaper, along with spices, and sent them for examination. The expert concluded that they could be traces of the powwow Indian ritual, or the culture of the native Dutch, who in the 1600s and 1700s came to the continent and settled in Pennsylvania, practicing various religious rituals. The problems of the early American settlers were reflected in the nature of their ceremonies, many related to livestock, finding water, or curing diseases. But there were also darker incantations and even demon worship rituals. Indicative of how they taught dogs loyalty, They added their blood to dog food. Such eaten food was a pledge of the dog's loyalty. True, the mold that was on the animal carcasses and on the walls of the Pennsylvania home affected the health of the family members. Unfortunately, they were also unable to get rid of the smell of the carcasses. Elise was last seen on January 31, 2013, in the lobby of a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing on the West Coast, making notes about the trip on her blog and communicating with her parents every day. On January 31st, those calls stopped. Elise had disappeared. Soon the police began a search, and her parents arrived. They found nothing. In February of the same year, the Los Angeles police published surveillance video footage of the girl before her disappearance. The footage shows her behaving strangely in the elevator, talking to unseen people, peering out from behind the door, crouching in the corner, opening and closing the door. This video raises even more questions. What is it? A nervous breakdown? Demonic possession? Unknown people out of the camera's view? Around the same time, hotel guests began reporting problems with the water supply. A television report included comments from a woman who had been at the hotel throughout the investigation. "The showers were terrible," said one hotel guest. "You open the faucet, first black water flows for a few seconds and then normal water. The water tasted nasty," she noted. "Horrible sweetish odor. Very strange, I can't even describe it." During the week, the guest never complained. "We didn't think about it," she said. "We figured it had always been like this here." On the morning of February 19th, a hotel employee went up to the roof and inspected the water storage tanks. It was there that authorities discovered the decomposing nude body of Elise, whose personal belongings were found nearby. After an autopsy, her death was ruled accidental. That said, the strange thing was that the tank had a metal latch that could be opened, but the administration said access to the roof was protected by an alarm and lock. The single-room hotel has a highly unusual history. Night hunter Richard Ramirez, convicted of 14 murders in the 1980s, lived on the hotel's 14th floor for several months in 1985. And serial killer Jack Unterweger is suspected of killing 3 prostitutes in 1991. That's when he lived in this hotel. He committed suicide in prison in 1994. In 1962, a hotel guest jumped out of a hotel window, killing herself and the pedestrian she landed on. In February 2021, a TV series based on the events that took place at the hotel in 2013 was released. Last year, the newspaper ran a big story about a family held in fear by 3 children, allegedly possessed by demons. The story of LaToya and her family involves children who climb walls, run from room to room, and threaten adults as if not in their low voices. It may seem like the story is literally ripped out of a horror movie. However, all of these events have been corroborated by nearly 800 pages of official reports and numerous interviews with police, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. One of the creepiest sections of the report contains testimony from the 9-year-old boy's babysitter. She described how the child grinned strangely and went backwards up the wall to the ceiling. He then flew over the babysitter and landed on his feet. Another passage tells how a 12-year-old girl told a psychiatrist that she felt something strangling and squeezing her so that she couldn't speak or move. She said she heard a voice telling her that she would never see her family again and would pass away for 20 minutes.